Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Questini here with a discussion about the 5 best Legendary Lords in Total War Warhammer 3 according to your votes on the various Legendary Lord polls that I've done on the channel over the last couple of weeks, as well as the race poll that I did. The Warriors cast didn't get S tier, but they did pretty well, A tier, and Archaon himself did win by a fairly comfortable margin compared to the other Legendary Lords of the Warriors of Chaos. He beat everyone else. Now, he didn't quite get the same overwhelming result that the other Legendary Lords that are on this list did get for their respective races, so that's why he's not considered one of the top 5, but it is still worth pointing out. Now, Archaon is kind of a slow-going Legendary Lord. He does start, not weak. Saying he starts weak is ridiculous, but rather that it takes him a while to start building up power. But once he does build up power, he gets to a ridiculous level of it. Be'lakor has more benefits early on. Archaon has more significant benefits later on, especially with regards to his faction effects, because he gets that research rate, he gets that diplomatic relations benefit, and he gets that souls benefit. Honestly, the diplomatic relations benefit is kind of whatever, but getting 25 souls for each vassal and getting the research rate does mean that you're going to be able to do things faster, research things faster, unlock things, and crucially, the moment you get going and the moment you unlock all of the Gifts of Chaos, you'll be able to get a lot more power through those Gifts of Chaos compared to any other Legendary Lord of the Warriors of Chaos. He's also the iconic Lord of the Warriors of Chaos for bloody good reason. He does have 4 quest items that he does get through various battles, though those battles are certainly not easy ones, it has to be said. And he's one of only 2 Legendary Lords for the Warriors of Chaos that can confederate through force all the other Legendary Lords of the Warriors of Chaos. So be it Kolic, Sigvald, Valkia, Festus, Be'lakor, he can do so. The other one is, of course, Be'lakor. Now, you don't have the same kind of campaign movement range, but you do certainly have a ridiculous level of power and a fairly safe starting position. Also, it's kind of funny that, he's the bringer of the end times, but really when you're playing his campaign, you just basically want to unite all the forces of order that you can do so through diplomatic subjugation. Because, for instance, in this campaign, I got Boris Ursus. It's basically like, take the fortress over here, force march all the way, take these 2 settlements before Boris can, and then once Boris moves out of the Tower of Torment, go in there and subjugate him and get a ridiculous level of power by having Boris as your vassal. Then go beat up Daniel, because you can subjugate him, hilariously enough. Go beat up Daniel, get more and more vassals. I would recommend focusing on getting vassals that are major Legendary Lords. Also, another benefit is you're fairly close to Tamarkand, which means you can also get his defeat rate. So you can get more heroes than all the other Legendary Lords of the Warriors of Chaos, at least early on, without using the load save character system. So be it long-term, short-term, campaign starting position, Lord effects, faction power, you are in a good position. You get various benefits for Lord recruit rank and experience for your army. You are focused on Undivided, you do get more exalted heroes, and other benefits. You also get a Regiment of Renown at level 2. So the moment you fight your first battle and you take your Dark Fortress, you can get the Swords of Chaos, Archaon's elite units in the lore. In fact, I think his entire army is supposed to be like this. I'm not entirely certain about that. But regardless, you have a ton of flexibility. Undivided Warriors of Chaos do have the most flexibility in their campaign. They don't have the same specialization as the Monogods do, but you do have the flexibility of roster, as well as the various Gifts of Chaos that others do lack. And number 5 is Grimgor Ironhide for the Greenskins. Grimgor did exceptionally well for the Greenskin race poll. He got a ridiculous share of the vote, and thus he is number 5 on this list. I'm guessing he's disappointed that he isn't considered the best, but who knows, maybe after the Greenskin rework, he will get back that title. Truth be told, though, regardless of how the community feels about it, I'll be honest, Grimgor, he's in an interesting situation. He may not necessarily have any kind of uniqueness to him as a legendary lord, except he's just really freaking good. I mean, he doesn't have a unique campaign mechanic, but he is just that powerful. His faction effects, pretty damn simple. Black Orcs and WAS, upkeep benefit for Black Orcs and Big Guns, and campaign movement range, as well as being able to recruit Black Orc big bosses from all provinces from the very beginning, which, combined with Hammer Khan's trait, which he has access to, whether or not it does get nerfed at one point or another, does give him a ridiculous level of power. But it's beyond that particular power that makes Grimgor so exceptionally strong. In battle, Grimgor is a freaking terror that if you deal with him early on, your only real option is to try and kite the bastard around the battlefield while you defeat his army. He is that kind of legendary lord. His province is very easy to secure and a fairly profitable one at that. And it's also secure from any kind of opponent that might attack it, because while it's not particularly defensible from a terrain standpoint, the settlements are close enough to each other, and the greenskins can move around it using the underway, that it is a real powerhouse of a defensive location for anyone to play a campaign in. And anyone that might threaten you is either fighting someone else like Zaytan or Kolek or Tamarkan, or they're not capable of dealing with you because they're minor factions. Furthermore, Grimgor has the easiest path of securing Zarnagrund of any campaign in the entire game. I'm not exaggerating on it. While others can do so, Grimgor will not only benefit immensely from taking Zarnagrund, because he has a chance of taking it out as a tier 4 settlement, but as a tier 5 settlement. But not only will he benefit from that immensely, but he will, combined with everything else and the inherent power of the greenskins and his own personal power, he will steamroll this campaign like it's no one's business. There are very few things in the game that can stand up to Grimgor when played properly, suffice to say, in this campaign. And you're looking at a situation where you might start spamming tier 4 and tier 5 units earlier than pretty much anyone else. There are some cheese tactics available for other campaigns to get a hold of all of this if you're playing Astrogoth and all that, but I'll be blunt, nothing compares to what Grimgor can do without cheesing. Like, I emphasize this aspect. You don't win as Grimgor with cheese. The cheese just exaggerates what he already has as an inherent power. You win this campaign with ease by playing him normally, and that is absolutely freaking ridiculous. And they're gonna make the greenskins better. I guess we'll see how that plays out. And number 4 is Ikit-Claw, the nuclear-powered rat from Skavenblight. I used to dislike this campaign for a number of reasons, because while I always understood the power potential that Ikit-Claw always had, I mean, dropping nukes in both campaign and in battles is certainly a very significant power, there were two things that held him back to a very significant amount. One, the inherent issues that ranged units, in particular gunpowder units, but ranged units in general, used to have in Warhammer 3. Now, that has been vastly improved compared to what it was before. While it's not perfect, it's a lot more similar to how things used to work in Warhammer 2 as opposed to 3. Now, some people will dispute that particular characterization, but suffice to say it is a difference. It's a question of friendly fire, pathfinding, etc. I would still say there's some work to be done on that level, but yes, certainly Ikit-Claw is a beneficiary of that. And then I learned how to exploit diplomacy in the game so that his miserable starting position over here, surrounded by very hostile factions, can be really powerful. Because you see, why fight Belegar? You have absolutely no reason to do so. There's no victory condition associated with it, no requirement to do so. And why bother? Why make Belegar a foe when you can turn him against his friends? Why find Belegar when you can butcher your way through the border princes, the entire dwarf kingdom, selling territory as you go to him, and making him your truest and most powerful ally? And the moment you give him Caracate Peaks, if you do go for that, well, let's just say this campaign kicks into overdrive. The Skaven Dwarf partnership in this particular campaign is real, gentlemen. I might be running out of money soon enough over here, but geez, the possibilities in this campaign are significant once you start realizing the sheer ludicrous power of diplomacy. And we are indeed playing a proper Skaven campaign. Snitch is better in quite a few respects because, from my point of view, he does have that initial better starting position. But once you do figure out this ability of his, and it's not really a cheese to engage in settlement trading, it's an inherent part of the game. How you choose to abuse diplomacy, that's a different thing. But we're certainly Skaven, yes. And we are embracing the Skaven playstyle in the name of the Horned Rat. Turning the dwarves against each other, is that glorious? And honestly, I could play the same game with Forgrim. I could play it with all the dwarves. I could play it with the Empire. While I will constantly have to feed them territory, and there are clearly limitations, imagine if I marched on Lorem and took the Oak of Ages and sold it to Belegar, and then asked him kindly for him to go to war against Orion and Durfu in return. The possibilities are significant. It really does go to show how crap of a campaign the Changeling has, because this is kind of like what Skaven wanted to do. But the thing about the Changeling, they were trying to aim for that troll campaign, manipulative campaign style with the Changeling, and they missed the mark inherently, because the fundamentals of diplomacy in Warhammer 3 that the Changeling is severely limited in, because he can't take settlements, make this kind of playstyle very viable if you can engage in settlement trading, which he cannot. Yes, this is more of a Changeling campaign than the actual freaking Changeling is. That is saying a great deal about Shadows of Change, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? And maybe a lesson for Creative Assembly going forward. I don't think I need to say anything more about the Ikit-Claw. He can spawn nukes, he can improve units, he's got, like, tactical and strategic nuclear weapons. He's got the most powerful armies from a range perspective in the game, though there's an argument to be made on the subject of fraud, though it's easier to get the benefits with Ikit-Claw as opposed to an individual unit customization of fraud. So yes, I have finally seen the light of Ikit-Claw, or rather Creative Assembly fixed the ranged issues, and I discovered to abuse settlement diplomacy to really an extreme that I didn't believe was possible before. And this is where I have to thank Mercy the Mat for that, because holy moly, I might need to do another campaign guide for Ikit-Claw, because holy shit, are things possible here. Let's just say that Belegar despises me in a significant number of ways, absolutely. But the fact that I can make this work, I mean, you could always fight Belegar, but you have literally no allies in that scenario if you do so, and you end up fighting everyone over here. You can win that, but yeah, it's not a great start. Whereas if you ally Belegar, or at least get to a point where you're not actively killing each other, then things do start going in your favor. Very much so. And number 3 is Drazoath the Ashen of the Chaos Dwarfs. With respect to the Chaos Dwarf Legendary Lords, the way I would describe them is that Astrogoth is really good in the early game, but he lacks the late game potential that either Drazoath or Zaytan do have. Zaytan is painful in the early game, but he has probably the most amount of potential in his campaign in terms of a long campaign because of all the labor and the caravans that he does have. Drazoath, however, is kind of like that sweet middle ground, because he does have some very solid benefits, both faction effects and lord effects, that do make him strong in both the short term and the long term. He's focused on really the Chaos Dwarf economy. Zaytan might be focused on laborers, Drazoath is focused on elite units, armaments, materials, and so on and so forth. That is a fairly powerful benefit to begin with in his campaign. But really what I think makes this campaign work beyond his skill line and the fact that he's probably the best individual caster in the game. I mean, Gelt gets the Cataclysm spells, maybe Drazoath should as well. Gelt might get those Cataclysm spells in his campaign, but it's not really Gelt's personal magical power, it's like his campaign power. With Drazoath, you have one of the best spells in the game, cast very cheaply, with the Flames of Asgore. This thing is ridiculous, and the fact that you can reduce its cost by such an amount is fairly significant. And on top of that, he's a pretty good melee combatant at the same time. Drazoath is really in a lot of ways a significant exception to the rules that you play on in most campaigns. I've stated this before and I'll say it again. In many campaigns with these kind of hybrid caster melee lords, most of the time you want to go their melee skill line and not go their magical skill line, partly because you can get magic with other casters you can get in every campaign. There's some pros and cons to be talked about, let's say, with some campaigns where we have limited casters, but for the most part it is encouraged to go down that particular playstyle of focusing on melee and army skills, if you have them. You only go pure magic if you have no melee choices. Katrin is a perfect example of this. If she had a melee skill line, by the way, she would actually be better. Or maybe a better caster skill line. Yes, Kislev does need a rework. I've stated this many times before. But it's none of those things that sell Drazoath's campaign. Not the long-term benefits, not his skill line, not his lord effects. What I think really works for Drazoath is his starting position is the most dynamic starting position of all the cast dwarves, and one of the most dynamic starting positions in the entire game. You've got Imric, you've got Tretch, you've got the Ogres, you've got Gorst, you've got Kugaf, and those are just the immediate concerns. To the west, you've got Forgrim, Ungrim. To the east, you've got Grimgor, and he is coming. Sweet moly, is he coming. This campaign is hard, undeniably so. You might be extremely powerful yourself, but you do have limitations on that power for a variety of reasons when it comes down to it. And that is what I think makes this campaign so incredibly popular. It's not the power, although you do start with limited uses of tactical nukes through... I apologize for this one. You do start with limited uses of tactical nuclear weapons for the prototype Mega Mortar, but it's not really that which is selling this particular campaign. You do have a settlement which is like kind of a pit stop for a lot of cafe and caravans, so you can get a lot of labor. It has been nerfed, but it's still pretty valuable and useful. And you do have many ways in how to play this particular campaign with very different possibilities on how to achieve success. And that is what I think really sells it. Because in an Astrogoth campaign or Zaytan campaign, you're kind of always doing the same things over and over again. In this campaign, you can do things in very different ways, and they're all perfectly viable. Do you go after Tretch with the risk of exposing yourself to Greases, Grimgor, Greases, and Imric? Or do you go after Imric very quickly in this campaign and try and make an alliance with Tretch to secure your western flank? All of those kind of things are possible. Do you go after Kugaf? Do you go after Greases? Do you go after Gorfs? Do you go in Cafe? Do you go to the west? Do you go to the north? Do you go to even the south? All of these things do work, and I think this is really the aspect that does sell Drazoath's campaign in a very good way. And as you'll see with the top two choices, it is not something that people care about in just one particular race, but in other races as well. At number 2, it would be Emperor Karl Franz of the Empire, the most iconic character for Total War Warhammer in general, and one of the most iconic characters for Warhammer Fantasy, alongside Gotrek, Felix, Teclis, Tyrion, etc. This has been a very, very long time coming, because even when the game launched, specifically Warhammer 1 launched, Karl Franz could have been argued to have had the worst campaign of the Empire, or a weaker campaign than even Gelt on the day the game launched. Because while he had his pros and cons compared to Gelt, absolutely, the reality of that particular situation is, even on the game launched, it was much easier to recruit Karl as a Legendary Lord if you were playing as Gelt than opposite. It was much harder to recruit Gelt. But now there are significant advantages from an objective standpoint, not just because people voted for Karl the most out of the Empire Legendary Lords, or that the Empire did the best out of the races, one of the best out of the races in the game in racial polling, but simply because while he doesn't have the magical capability of Gelt, or both the magical and army capability of Elspeth. Elspeth has the best armies, Gelt has the best magic. We can argue about some benefits Elspeth can have with magic, specifically Winds of Magic with her Hellstorm rocket batteries. But the thing about Karl is that he is the empire builder of the Empire. See, there's quite a few races: High Elves, Dark Elves, Cast Dwarves, etc., that do have one particular legendary lord that may not necessarily be the best in battle, though in some cases they can be the best in battle, but what really sets them apart is their ability to dominate on the campaign map. Here's the advantages that Karl has. He has more Electrocon State Troopers than anyone else. While it does take longer to unlock them than in Elspeth's or Gelt's campaigns, you do get an extra troop pool capacity for Electrocon State Troopers. And while State Troopers, not all of them are the greatest units, things like Eldred's Guards, Caribur Greatswords, things like that, the Outriders of Grain Launchers, those are all very good units. Mortars with no friendly fire, etc. But beyond that, through the electoral machinations, you can confederate the legendary lords, the other legendary lords, or all imperial factions. You can guarantee confederation, and you can do it also in the easiest possible fashion. Once you get vision with an Electrocount, or with any imperial faction, and this includes Gelt and Volkmar and Marcus Wolfhard, once you get vision with them and you upgrade the electoral machinations over here through Emperor of the Empire, which just simply requires you to get enough prestige, which is easy enough. Once you do that, you will be able to confederate across the world. This gives you a ton of campaign flexibility. You don't have the teleportation of Elspeth or the start in Cafe and return to the Empire's Gelt, but what you do have does work very well. And as I noted with Drazoath, people do tend to like campaigns that have more variety in them than others. And this is the thing about Karl. If you're playing Elspeth's campaign, it's pretty singular focus. You start in Nuln, you go deal with Faldorf and Saland, you may make an alliance with Belegar if you can beat him to the punch to Karak Izor, and then you go deal with Vlad. And then you do have some more flexibility, but with Karl, you have a lot of flexibility from the very beginning. Do you go for Marienburg? Do you go for Midland? Do you go for Bretonia? Do you go for Stirland or Talabayam? That is your choice about what you're doing in this campaign. Who do you confederate first, or do you try and keep all these Electrocount state factions intact for as long as possible so you can abuse their AI benefits, especially on higher difficulty, so they build up these provinces, and then you use your confederation power to guarantee that confederation. Furthermore, you can also build up your own provinces faster than all the others combined, with the exception of Gelt's particular event. But between population surplus, experience for an army, reducing corruption, instant recruitment, degrading army for an Electrocon State Trooper, etc., you end up with significant benefits in terms of building a lot of armies, building a lot of settlements, securing a lot of settlements, securing a lot of territory. There is an enormous level of flexibility in this campaign. It's an interesting campaign early on. It's not necessarily a free ride as Elspeth or Gelt do have it, but I think that is actually part of the appeal for a lot of people. Don't get me wrong, I personally do prefer playing Gelt in a lot of ways, but I gotta admit that it is certainly a dynamic campaign playing as Karl. So those are the benefits over there with him. So many different ways to play, so many things you can take advantage of, so many things you can cheese as well, like Marienburg, for instance. So tons of advantages. Not the best armies, not necessarily the most variety. It does take a while to actually get those state troopers, but once you do, you are steamrolling. Not the best climate. Gelt does have you beat there with his mountain climate, but outside of that, you are in a pretty good spot. Whether or not you want to go to Lustria is really up to you, gentlemen, with respect to that. At number 1 is Malakai Makaisson of the Dwarves. The Dwarves did get the highest share of the votes in the polling, and Malakai got the most amount of votes in the Legendary Lord polling that I did. And this is a conclusion that I actually agree with fully, 100%. See, what makes Malakai's campaign really good is not, oh, he gets thunder barges or OP units. No, it's not that. It's the fact that, one, you do have the fantasy of replicating the Gotrek and Felix campaign in Warhammer 3. This is something CA themselves stated openly when they were showcasing this particular campaign. That's the first point. Second point on this aspect, beyond Gotrek and Felix, and it would have been nice if they had added some extra voice acting for Gotrek and Felix, But second point on this is how dynamic this campaign is. Beyond Malakai's adventure, which do add a great deal of variety in this particular campaign, in terms of different playstyles, in terms of missions, in terms of doing things differently dependent on which of these objectives you're going for, the starting position over here in Kraka does open up a significant number of possibilities. You can go in the Castways, you can fight in Norska, you can fight in the Darklands, you can go through Kislev in the Empire, or to go in the Northern World Edge Mountains. Huge amount of possibilities, huge amount of variety, and because you have Frozen Climate as a suitable climate, you can go even all the way to Nagaron. There's only 3 Legendary Lords that do have Frozen Climate of Dwarves, out of all of them, and those are Ungrim, Malakai, and Grombrindle. And Malakai, while Grombrindle has his own benefits, and so does Ungrim, Malakai, I would say, is the best out of all of them. You probably can achieve a greater campaign result playing as Grombrindle, just leveling him up properly as opposed to having to rush to try and confederate him through the Great Book of Grudges. But all the same, Malakai does offer certain tangible benefits in his campaign. Great campaign, great variety. There's not much more to be said on that, really. Huge amount of power in himself, in his army, in his Horde army. And I think really, as I stated in my review of this campaign and the overall review of Thrones Decay, this campaign, I feel, sets a new standard of what we expect in a Total War campaign. It's not about the power. I emphasize this. It's really about how dynamic this campaign is, the number of choices, and the fact that you have a campaign that is great not only in the early game. In fact, I would dare say it's not even the best in the early game. Grombrindle is better in the early game. But a campaign that scales very well with long-term goals, potential, possibilities that can play out in so many different ways. This is an inherent benefit with the Dwarves after the Thrones of Decay rework, but Malakai just does it that extra bit better between his starting position and his adventures. And it is a really fun playstyle, I'm not gonna lie. It's not really about the Thunder Barges, it's not, I think, because of, oh, it's a fresh new campaign. Elspeth didn't win the Empire poll, and she's a fresh campaign. And you see the list, right? You have people like Archaon, you have Grimgor, you have DLC lords like Ikit-Claw and Drazoath and Malakai, but you also have a good number of legendary lords that have been in the game for a long time, still rising to the top of this list. And perhaps that goes to show that people don't just care purely about power, or they care purely about what's the new kid on the block. That opinions come from all kinds of sources. That's all I had to say. Questine signing out, and stay tuned for more. Let me know what you guys think about all of this.